Detective Laura Hayes never expected her quiet town of Maplewood to harbor such darkness, but when parents reported a mysterious man watching their children, she knew she had to act fast. Meanwhile, the predator, hiding in plain sight, thought no one was paying attention, but he was about to make a fatal mistake that would finally expose his sinister secrets. The town of Maplewood had always been a picture of small-town tranquility. Its tree-lined streets, quiet cul-de-sacs, and friendly neighbors made it the kind of place where children could play outside without constant supervision, and adults felt safe leaving their doors unlocked. Summers were filled with the laughter of kids on bikes, the chatter of families at local parks, and the comfort of familiar faces greeting one another. But that sense of safety began to shift in early 2023, when a series of unsettling incidents started to surface. Reports of children being approached by a man in suspicious circumstances began trickling into the local police station. At first, the incident seemed minor: a stranger asking a child for directions, lingering too long near school grounds, or appearing near playgrounds without reason. Parents dismissed the initial reports, hoping it was nothing serious. But the frequency of the incidents grew steadily, and the anxiety in the community became impossible to ignore. Authorities soon realized they were dealing with a predator who was careful and methodical. He left no fingerprints, no messages, and no obvious trail to follow. Even local security cameras, which once seemed to offer reassurance, captured little beyond fleeting shadows and vague outlines. Each failed lead frustrated the police. And yet the tension in Maplewood continued to escalate. Parents began altering daily routines, picking up children earlier from school, walking them to parks, and keeping a constant eye on the streets. Children were warned not to stray too far from home, to avoid talking to strangers, and to be wary of anyone who seemed unusual. Despite these precautions, the predator's presence seemed to cast a shadow over the town, as if a dark undercurrent had seeped into its very streets. The police held emergency meetings, trying to piece together any patterns from the sporadic reports. Officers examined the areas where incidents had occurred, noting the proximity to schools, playgrounds, and bus stops. Local authorities began distributing pamphlets warning parents about stranger danger, but even these measures could not fully ease the growing fear. Community meetings were called, and parents shared stories of encounters that were unsettling, though brief, and each anecdote painted a picture of someone patient, calculating, and unnervingly familiar with the routines of children in Maplewood. As the days passed, it became clear that this predator was not random. He was deliberate, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Maplewood, a town that had once felt completely safe, now faced a chilling reality. Someone with a hidden agenda was walking among them, and catching him would require vigilance, skill, and a relentless determination that the community was only just beginning to understand. Detective Laura Hayes had built a reputation for her meticulous approach and relentless determination. When she was assigned to the Maplewood case, she immediately recognized the complexity and danger involved. The predator was not careless. He moved with precision, selecting children who were alone for only brief moments and leaving no obvious trail. Laura began by reviewing every report the police had collected, scrutinizing the eyewitness accounts for small details that others might have overlooked. Each description, each fleeting observation, was examined for patterns: the predator's clothing, his timing, his behavior in public spaces. The more Laura studied, the more she realized that this was not the work of a random stranger. It was the methodical planning of someone who had studied the town and its routines. Social media and online platforms became another layer of investigation. Laura worked alongside cybercrime specialists to analyze posts, messages, and interactions that might connect to the suspect. Slowly, fragments of a digital footprint began to emerge, showing that the predator had been observing children in the area for months, even years. Friends of local families were interviewed, neighbors were questioned, and small businesses near playgrounds and schools were checked for surveillance footage. Though the leads were often small or inconclusive, each piece added to the growing profile of the suspect. Authorities learned that he avoided obvious confrontations, preferred locations with minimal adult supervision, and had a chilling ability to blend into the environment. Laura knew that patience was key. A misstep could alert the predator and allow him to disappear before authorities could act. She began mapping out his movements, predicting possible locations where he might strike next. Community awareness campaigns were launched, urging parents to be vigilant while keeping them from panicking. Local volunteers assisted in observing parks, streets, and bus stops, reporting anything unusual. Laura's investigation became a careful balance of anticipation and caution, requiring her to think like the predator without giving him any indication that he was being watched. As the days turned into weeks, the tension in Maplewood grew. Parents, still fearful, watched their children closely while law enforcement silently tracked every shadow, every subtle movement. The town, once calm and familiar, had become a web of surveillance and vigilance. Detective Hayes remained focused, analyzing, calculating, and preparing for the moment when the predator would make a mistake. It was only a matter of time before the careful planning, the patience, and the tireless effort of the investigation would converge to bring him into the open. But until that day came, Maplewood held its breath, unsure of what dangers might lurk around the next corner. After weeks of careful observation and analysis, Detective Laura Hayes and her team decided it was time to escalate their operation. The predator had shown a consistent pattern, favoring certain parks, schoolyards, and quiet streets during specific hours when children were often unattended. Using this information, law enforcement devised a carefully orchestrated sting, designed to catch him in the act without putting anyone at risk. Plainclothes officers posed as parents, stationed near playgrounds and along common routes children took to and from school. Hidden cameras and motion sensors were installed in strategic locations, feeding real-time data to the command center where Laura monitored every movement. Every member of the team understood the stakes. One misstep, and the predator could vanish again, taking the sense of safety from Maplewood even further. The operation required patience, and tension hung in the air like a heavy fog. Days passed with no sign of the suspect, testing the endurance of the officers and the limits of the community's nerves. Parents were anxious, wondering if their children would be safe, while Detective Hayes meticulously reviewed footage and reports, looking for the slightest clue that could indicate the predator's next move. Then, on a quiet morning, a man appeared near the schoolyard, lingering at the edge of the playground where children were playing. His behavior was subtle but suspicious. He kept his distance while watching, shifting from side to side as if assessing the environment. Laura recognized him immediately from earlier reports of fleeting figure and grainy security footage, now tangible and real. The predator moved cautiously, attempting to remain inconspicuous, but every step he took was being monitored. Officers followed his route with precise coordination, keeping him under surveillance without alerting him to their presence. The moment was tense. The entire operation hinged on timing and restraint. A single false move could allow him to escape, forcing the investigation back to square one. Yet the detectives knew this was their chance to stop him before he could harm anyone. As he turned a corner and approached a narrow alley where children sometimes walked, the predator failed to notice the hidden cameras positioned above. This small lapse, imperceptible to him, was enough. Laura signaled the team to move in, and officers quietly closed the perimeter. The sting operation had worked. The predator was about to be caught in the very act that had terrorized Maplewood. The town, once cloaked in fear, was on the verge of seeing justice unfold, though no one could yet imagine the full extent of the chilling secrets that would soon come to light. The moment the predator entered the narrow alley, everything changed. Officers, positioned in concealment, sprang into action with precise coordination, surrounding him from every side. He froze, confusion and panic flickering across his face as the realization of the trap hit. There was no escape. In his haste to maintain the illusion of normalcy, he had overlooked the cameras and the officers lying in wait. The arrest was swift, leaving him little time to resist. Detective Laura Hayes stepped forward to oversee the operation, ensuring that the procedure was carried out safely and efficiently. In that tense moment, the air seemed heavy with both relief and horror. Maplewood's residents, unaware of the precise details unfolding, were about to learn that someone who had hidden in plain sight had been living among them with sinister intentions. The investigation quickly moved from apprehension to discovery. At the police station, detectives began combing through the predator's personal effects, uncovering a disturbing trail of premeditated actions. Digital devices revealed extensive records of online activity, showing detailed tracking of children's routines and locations. He had maintained multiple accounts to conceal his movements, demonstrating a level of cunning that sent shivers through the investigation team. Notebooks and calendars meticulously documented observations about local children, confirming that this was not a momentary lapse in judgment, but a calculated pattern of predatory behavior. Each piece of evidence painted a clearer, darker picture of the threat he posed, and the community's fear that had been growing for months suddenly crystallized into grim reality. As the details emerged, Maplewood struggled to process the extent of the betrayal. Friends, neighbors, and even acquaintances had unknowingly interacted with the predator, never suspecting the danger lurking beneath the surface of his seemingly ordinary life. Authorities conducted a thorough search of his home, uncovering additional items that underscored the premeditated nature of his crimes. Photographs, notes, and surveillance equipment indicated a methodical and chilling obsession, one that could have escalated if not for the vigilance of law enforcement. Detective Hayes ensured that every lead was pursued, connecting the predator to previous incidents that had initially seemed isolated. Families began to regain a sense of safety, but the psychological impact lingered. The arrest and subsequent discoveries served as a stark reminder that danger can hide in the most unsuspecting places. Maplewood had faced a threat so insidious that its exposure required patience, coordination, and a steadfast refusal to give up. While justice had been set into motion, the community now understood that vigilance, awareness, and swift action were the keys to protecting their children and reclaiming the peace they had once taken for granted. With the predator behind bars, Maplewood slowly began to reclaim a sense of normalcy, though the shadow of fear lingered. Parents cautiously allowed their children to play outside again, walking alongside them at first, then gradually giving them more independence as trust in the community's vigilance grew. Schools implemented stricter safety protocols, and local authorities continued to monitor areas where the predator had been most active, determined that nothing like this would happen again. Detective Laura Hayes remained in contact with families, offering guidance and reassurance, her presence a steady reminder that the town's safety had been hard-won through careful planning and relentless dedication. The predator faced trial, and the court proceedings gripped the community. Evidence collected by law enforcement revealed the full extent of his disturbing activities. Surveillance footage, detailed logs of children's routines, and digital records painted a chilling portrait of a calculated, patient individual who had been operating undetected for months. Families followed the trial closely, anxious for justice and closure. The court ultimately delivered a verdict that reflected the severity of his crimes, and he was sentenced to a long prison term, ensuring he would no longer be a threat to the children of Maplewood or anywhere else. The judgment brought relief, but it also reminded everyone that even in seemingly quiet towns, danger could hide behind a mask of normalcy. In the weeks following the trial, Maplewood's residents took steps to heal and strengthen the bonds within their community. Neighborhood watch programs expanded, parents shared tips and experiences, and children learned about safety in a way that was both practical and reassuring rather than frightening. The town understood that vigilance could never be complacent, but it also learned that courage, awareness, and cooperation could protect even the most vulnerable. Detective Hayes became a local figure of respect and trust, her methodical approach having ensured the predator's capture without harm to the community. Though the memories of fear did not vanish entirely, Maplewood's children once again filled the streets with laughter and play, their lives slowly returning to normal. The predator's exposure served as a lesson in awareness, resilience, and the importance of a community united against danger. Maplewood had faced darkness and survived, and in doing so, had emerged stronger and more vigilant. The story of the predator who had once hidden in plain sight became a cautionary tale, a reminder that even in small towns with tree-lined streets and familiar faces, vigilance and courage were essential to keeping children safe and preserving the peace that the community cherished above all else.